Good morning. I'm Robert Summercraft, Dean of the Terry College of Business at the University of Georgia, and I want to welcome everyone to a very special Terry Third Thursday. Today, as all of you know, we've got President Michael Adams with us today, and I'm glad to see that so many of our regular attendees have been able to come, as well as some newer faces. We've got representatives of the Arch Foundation and the University of Georgia Foundation. We've got our three senior vice presidents here, and it is just terrific to see such a big crowd come out for this important presentation. I also want to welcome you to our Executive Education Center here at One Live Oak. This, as many of you know, is our base of operations for the Terry College for our Executive MBA program and for many of our other executive programs and just for reaching out to our alumni. So it's been a really strong area for us to work from here in Atlanta. You know, I often hear from alumni that they'd like an opportunity to meet some of our students, to find out what currently is on their minds, and in many cases to try to help those students, whether it's with their careers or with advising or just, just to get a sense of what's going on with our students today. We do have a few students today with us, and I wanted to mention them and have you recognize them. We've got 8 current MBA students with us, and you saw their photos flashing up as you were getting your breakfast a little bit earlier today. They're going to be meeting with some of the members of our alumni board immediately after Terry Third Thursday, and so we're glad, and I hope you had a chance to talk with some of them. We have Priscilla O'Keefe, who is a Deer Run Fellow for fall of 2010. That is a new program that you've probably heard about in some of our press, something that Doug Ivester is supporting. Melissa Waters is also with us, an alternate for Deer Run Fellows and one of our Terry Ambassadors. And speaking of Terry Ambassadors, you've probably noticed we've had a few of our undergraduates here helping with all the arrangements of the Terry Third Thursday this morning, and I certainly appreciate their effort. Can I have all the students, including our 8 MBA students, please stand so that we can welcome you to Terry Third Thursday. Okay, thank you. You hear me say each month that Terry Third Thursday wouldn't be possible without the good work of our alumni board, including the committee for Terry Third Thursday, and also the sponsors. And we have as our corporate sponsor this season the Bank of North Georgia. We also have 2 media sponsors, the Atlanta Business Chronicle and Public Broadcasting Atlanta. And let's show our support and appreciation for our sponsors. Now, before we get started with today's program, I want to take just a minute and preview a couple of programs that are coming up later this summer. On June 17th, our next program, we're going to have one of our own alumni board members, James Sheppard, as our speaker. James, as many of you know, is co-founder and chairman of that remarkable Sheppard Center, and he'll be our guest talking about the Sheppard Center's mission, restoring hope and rebuilding lives. Coming up after that, in July, on July 15th, we've got Mark Rosenberg, President and CEO of the Task Force for Global Health. And then in August, we've got Ken Stewart, Commissioner for the Georgia Department of Economic Development. And now on to today's program. It is my sincere pleasure to welcome and introduce today's speaker, UGA's President Michael Adams. President Adams is in the 13th year of his presidency at the University of Georgia, and that distinguishes him as one of the nation's longest-serving university presidents. He is well known for his service as an elected leader to some of the United States' most prominent educational institutions, including the American Council on Education, the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities, and the NCAA's Executive Committee. Under his leadership, the university has achieved its highest quality ever and has seen that quality recognized in the highest rankings that the university has ever achieved. The rise in our reputation has come even as the university has expanded in terms of its size and scope. And to better accommodate those additional students and the faculty, the President has overseen the development and construction of more than 6 million square feet of new space, as well as the renovation and restoration of a number of historic structures on campus, including some on the North Campus. President Adams has served the state well over his tenure. He's recently conducted, in the recently concluded legislative session, we see another convincing example of just how effective our president can be. None of us should underestimate the leadership he displayed or the value of the work that he and his team did in making the case for supporting higher education in Georgia and assuring that future students and the employers of our graduates will be able to count on the University of Georgia and other institutions in the state for the best possible education. President Adams has given a very detailed budget update on campus yesterday, and perhaps he'll share some of that information with us today. So please join me in welcoming President Michael Adams.
One of the longest serving means I have more white hair than most now. I had none when I took this job, but it's been a great run for 13 years, and I'm honored to be asked back to do this again. I appreciate the good work that Robert and all of you associated with the Terry College do. I'm particularly impressed with the quality of the young people I have met this morning. Our students across the board now are some of the very, very best in America. It's why many of us get up every morning. We are doing a much better job than ever of keeping the best minds in Georgia, and we're attracting now some pretty good minds from outside the state to the university as well, and I'm especially grateful for the role that the Terry College plays in all of that. I also have a traveling party with me this morning. We don't normally go quite like this. I'm not much on entourages, but all three senior vice presidents are here this morning. We have a real estate foundation board meeting right after this morning, but most of you know Tim Burgess, who I normally refer to as the bag man. He's the university's chief financial officer and has done a terrific job during these trying times. Tom Landrum, the Senior VP for External Affairs, is the guy who sends you all of those empty envelopes, hoping that you will put something in the envelope in return. And then somebody who's really a hero on campus among the students, and our new provost, Jerry Moorhead. And I've made a lot of good decisions, I think, the last 13 years, but I don't know any that I've made that people have thought made more sense than selecting Jerry as the new provost. He's now in his fifth month, doing a great job. It seems like he's been there forever in some ways, but all three of them are key players in the successes that we've achieved the last several years, and I hope if you don't know them, you'll have an opportunity or take the opportunity to get to know them a bit this morning as well. I changed what I originally thought I was going to do this morning. I have a basic Rotary Club speech entitled "Excellence is Not Elitism." And what I basically do, I'm going to give you about 45 seconds of that. I basically justify the kind of admissions policies that led us to have all of you at the University of Georgia. That's not a commonly accepted thing in every facet and corner of the state. The freshmen who will come this year will come with about a 3.8 and a 1270-75 SAT. That's the mean. The honors college will come with a 4-point plus and about a 1460 board score. And frankly, it's important that we keep young people of those characteristics in the state and not trading off to Duke or Vanderbilt or Virginia or wherever. And while we'll never bat 1,000% in that regard, we're doing better than ever. That means that sometimes people whose ancestors 3 or 4 or 5 generations worth have been Bulldogs are having to go somewhere else. And that creates some of the greatest political dissonance that I have to deal with every day. But we have the highest number of minorities ever in the student body, both African American and Hispanic. We're about 23% minority in the class that will come in. We are building a leadership class for the entire state, and that's what all of you are about. It's what the university has been doing for generations. And so if I ever get asked back, I might make that speech then. But we've been in the news too much lately for me to not talk a little bit about what we've been through the last 4 months and to help you understand perhaps a little better some of the strategies that we have employed. I'm going to take about 20 minutes of your time. It's not going to be just quite as boring as a budget update, but I'm going to use a good bit of numbers with you. I want you to know where we are and why we are where we are in the state right now. I know many of you and your businesses are fighting the same battles that we have fought, especially the last 2 years. It's not just a Georgia recession or a national recession, it's been a world recession, and probably the most significant one since the Great Depression of the late 1920s, early 1930s. And we've had to change the way we do business in a number of ways in order to deal with these new realities. Perhaps some of you have faced similar challenges, but I do want you to understand a little bit about what we're doing and why we're doing it, and let you appreciate some of what you've read in the newspaper. There are 3 articles in the AJC this morning about the university. I don't know how many of you have seen it. There's one about the fact that the feds are auditing us. Which is always a pleasant experience to have them come and set up shop. To the best of our knowledge, it's completely routine. We're one of about 40 major research universities. They want to see if they can squeeze any more UBIT, unrelated business income taxes out of us, and we think we're clean, but we'll see. Secondly, there's an article that Laura Diamond wrote about a conversation she and I had earlier this week about what I'm going to share with you today. And then the real news that most of you care about, Mr. Basketball Marcus Thornton signed with the Bulldogs yesterday. And I'm going to now start working to try and get the football program up to the level of the basketball program. And we'll see how all that turns out. We just completed the longest legislative session in the history of the state of Georgia. The session, in essence, goes year-round, but they meet, according to the Constitution, they meet for 40 days. And when they came into session this year, they did so with a new speaker, a governor who was a last year lame duck governor, 12 months into a 15-month run of consistently declining state revenues. For the first time in the state's history, 2 consecutive years, the state collected less revenue than it did in the prior year. You may have seen early on in March a proposal by at least a small group of legislators that would have impacted the university system an additional $300 million in cuts. All in, all out, it ended up being about $140 million, a little less than half what they were talking about through some of your efforts, frankly. And it was at a level that we clearly could not sustain and do for our students what we needed to do. So what I want to do is to give you a brief update on all of that, and then let's talk about where we are and see what kind of suggestions you may have. Now that we know where we are, the legislature has acted, the regents have now acted on tuition. You've read about that in the news. We've done everything that we've done the last 18 months predicated on maintaining and building on the quality of the educational experience at UGA. That's our most important mission, and it's what we want to protect. In order to maintain that quality, we've got to start replenishing faculty ranks. I'll share those numbers with you in a moment, but we've lost faculty numbers consistently over the last 2 or 3 years. This will be the 3rd year without a raise for the faculty, and we are slowly and intentionally building those numbers back. As you can see here, these are the state revenue trends. Go back to the fateful October of '08, where most of us lost a third of our retirement, all the way until March of this year. For 15 consecutive months, state revenues had declined, and you can see on the chart the amounts by which they had declined. For the first time in 15 months in March, we were up slightly, 1%, and then to everyone's chagrin in April, partly blamed on income tax returns, the revenues were down again. Times do seem to be getting a touch better, however. There was a survey done of the 48 contiguous states. 42 of them project that fiscal year 11 revenues, which for the state of Georgia begins July 1 of 2010, will be higher than, or 11 will be higher than it was in 2010. And only 4 states, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Illinois, and Colorado, indicated that they would be worse off in 11 than they were in 10. The next slide, though, is the one that has been most troublesome to us. The impact of this constant decline in state revenue on UGA has been significant, if not dramatic. I'm going to show you 2 subsets of the total budget that are particularly important. The resident instruction budget, that's where most of the faculty is paid from. All in, all out, will be about $1.5 billion this year, including the cooperative organizations. But the core $400 million resident instruction budget, you can see what's happened to it. Even in 2010, the year just completed, $371 million. We will begin with $327 million from the state on July 1. On the B budgets, many of you are familiar with that term in the state. All of the things that we do for the state, the Cooperative Extension Service, the 4-H programs, the State Botanical Garden, the list goes on and on and on. Their cuts have been even more significant. All in, all out in the E&G, it was about 18% over the last 2 years. These are almost 20% cuts, as you can see, in the B budgets. When you combine them, then you see the total trend line, which causes all of us to want to continue to do everything just like we've always done it, but with these amounts of fewer dollars, obviously there have had to be some adjustments. The total appropriation then, the next slide shows for the University of Georgia for fiscal year 11, which I mentioned begins July 1, will be $327 million in the A budget, $75 million in the B budget, and from our top, that's down $101 million. And I don't care how big you are, $101 million is real money. The next slide will show you that this is what we're going to have to deal with, but to give you perspective, we're now back at the same level of state support we had a decade ago. So I don't know how many of you are running your businesses on the same level of core revenue that you were 10 years ago. Probably not many of you. but that's what we've been faced with. The next slide shows you that during that same time, we've added almost, in fact, a little over 4,000 students. We've absorbed all of the salary increases, utility increases for that period of time. And we have made a major commitment to the state of Georgia, but each year now, particularly the last 3 or 4 years, the state's commitment to us is less and less every year. And I'm going to say a word or two about what the long-term implications of that are in just a moment. When you look forward, you have to make all of these lines come together, but we have more students, more buildings to heat and cool, more salary obligations, and less state support with which to do so. Now, one of the key ways of dealing with this, and what's happened, I've already talked to some of you who have students at UGA. The Regents just last week passed for the research universities, us, Georgia Tech, Georgia State, and the medical college, $500 per semester or $1,000 a year increase in tuition, far and away the largest increase in the history of the University of Georgia. Now, lest you think that makes up $101 million, that will, in essence, add about $17.5 million to the university coffers, because I remind you that 2 cohorts, the juniors and seniors, are still on the old Fix for 4 program, which we lobbied against when it was put in. And the even more telling slide, I think, is the FTE student, state funds per FTE student, full-time equivalent, which you can see has fallen off dramatically in the last 2 years. Let's go to the next slide, Chuck. It should not surprise you then that the relationship between state funds and state and tuition funds added together are mirror images of one another. In other words, what the state has basically done, and again, there's arguable public policy issues here that we can talk through, but we are basically lessening by every measure what the state is giving us, and that burden is being transferred to individual students and parents. The thing that worries me about that is the state is increasingly saying that education is only a private good. It is not a public good in which the state needs to invest, which has been a big part of the undergirding philosophy of the state of Georgia since 1785. And it's on those kind of grounds that I have most argued this year. The next slide. Even with those increases, however, as we've tried to deal with Fix for 4 and some of the other things that we have argued against, we are still with tuition. We're at the mean of our peers. We have a board-approved list of institutions that we're supposed to compare to. And it includes, if you can't see the small print, Michigan State, UC Davis, Ohio State, Kentucky, Arizona, Missouri, Maryland, Iowa, Iowa State, North Carolina State, LSU, and Florida. We're now at the mean level of tuition. I know that huge increases are coming in both Florida and LSU on that end of the scale. I have called for many years for us to be at the national mean of institutions like this. It took this crisis to get us there, and the sad part about it is we're simply filling holes with it instead of making the kind of positive improvements that I was hoping we could make once we did get there. The next slide indicates the big impact that concerns me has been on the faculty. you can tell that we are now below 2001 numbers in full-time professional faculty. We are below 2007 numbers in full-time staff. And everybody at UGA is working longer and harder. We're down almost 600 total employees, all in, all out, during this time. And simply everybody has had to do more with less, and they will have to for the immediate future. Frankly, between how conservatively we managed, the tuition increase, the lessening of numbers of bodies, we're going to be slightly better off in fiscal year 11 than we were in fiscal year 10. But it's a result of some strategic employment management decisions we've made. And I regret to say to you that there will yet probably be some very limited and yet strategic additional targeted layoffs and program reductions that you'll hear about over the next 3 to 4 months. I am pleased, however, that most of the popular units that got all of the attention that we hung out there indicating what was about to go in March. The 4-H program, the Botanical Gardens, WUGA, the Cooperative Extension, and a number of other things, some of which you can see here, the Small Business Development Centers. Those programs will all continue. Some of them will be tweaked or sliced a bit to make the lines come together. But frankly, holding out all of those programs energized our constituency across the state. As all of you know, there is a Bulldog Nation. And the outpouring of support for all of that was very helpful in our relations with the legislature. And I don't want to be overly bold about this, but what we did in March changed the debate. And anybody who watched the legislature this year will tell you that. And we are indebted to many of you in this room, and especially to Steve Wrigley, our Vice President for Government Relations, that many of you know, who has a Northwestern PhD and was Chief of Staff for Zell Miller when Zell was governor, and Chris Comiskey, who was the former Chief of Staff to the former Speaker of the House and is now our State Relations Director. Those guys work day and night for months to have us end up where we are. So let me close with not so much doom and gloom, but there are a few reasons for optimism. We do think there's evidence that the state economy may begin now to recover slightly, not a quick uptick like that, but a slow and we hope steady. We have a much better budget reality and relationship with the legislature and the regents than we did when all of this hit the fan a few weeks ago. We have revenue from a tuition increase that will now continue for years to come, and as those other two cohorts of the third and fourth year roll off of Fix for 4, that will provide additional revenue. I announced when Jerry was appointed permission for him to start adding back 25 additional faculty, and I just announced yesterday another 25 that we will begin hiring in the fall. And so the process of rebuilding is now beginning, at least based on what we now know. Tax receipts come out monthly. The legislature meets, as many of you know, again in January. The regents meet about 9 months a year, and we're impacted by all of those, not to mention by a number of things that we have done. Research is up about 45% over the last 3 years. The indirect recovery cost that we get off of that research has helped. We've had 4 consecutive years, thank you very much for many of you, of $100 million plus fundraising, and all of those elements together have allowed us to keep our nose above water. We think we have frankly done a pretty good job through the recession to streamline the university in the right areas and to prepare it to move to even the next level as we come out of this. Despite the challenges of the last few months,
We're still teaching Georgia's brightest at a very high level. We're still conducting research at a world-class level. We are still serving the people of Georgia on what I believe to be one of the most beautiful campuses in America. And we're serving them at a time where I believe the state needs resources, human capital resources, which is what we're ultimately about. And I believe is the real important capital of the 21st century, more effectively than we ever before. I want all of you to know, and I don't say this just by way of a postscript, that I truly believe that Terry College is one of the key elements in whether or not we're going to be successful as we move through these challenges. The college attracts many of our best and brightest among a very strong group to begin with. We are now producing young people. I just came from the Peabodys in New York. You'd be amazed at how many young people now don't just set their sights on Atlanta, as great a place as this is to live, and where my family has been since 1950 in one form or another. But investment banking in New York, export-import businesses in London, all sorts of business in Shanghai. Everywhere I go in the world, I run into Terry College people. And it bodes very, very well for our future. And I'm grateful to have the opportunity to spend a few minutes with you this morning. Thanks very much. Take a few questions. Do we have time?
Yeah, we have time for a few questions. The president said he's willing to do that. Let me just tell those of you who don't come each month that this is going to be part of a podcast. It's also a very long room, as you can see, and so to make sure that everyone hears your question and also to get it into the podcast, please raise your hand. We'll bring you a microphone, and that way we'll be able to get your questions answered better. So,
Yes, sir. Here comes a lady with a microphone.
Can you comment on how our aid budget compares to the peer group that you showed, but more importantly, I'm assuming there's probably another peer group that you're...
Yeah, there's an aspirational group. Well, you know, it's really funny. The answer is it's mixed. I know those institutions. I have degrees from a couple of them, and all in, all out, until the last 3 years, state support for higher ed in this state has frankly been pretty darn good. And I don't think anybody, the governor, the legislative leadership, I don't think anybody has enjoyed doing what they've had to do the last 3 years. What does concern me long time is this shift from public responsibility to total private responsibility for higher ed. Now, there may be a Virginia or a Michigan alumnus or two in the room. I don't want to do what the University of Virginia and the University of Michigan have done. I do not want to privatize the University of Georgia. I do not want to be 50% out of state. I want to serve the people of Georgia as we've done for 225 years. I want to keep the best minds in Georgia. I want to build the economy in Georgia. And I want to be the place producing the state's subsequent leadership classes. But if we continue going down the road that we've been down the last 3 or 4 years, we will have no choice but to go. Virginia gets about 11% of its budget from the state. This year we'll be in the 31-32% range, even with what all I have told you. I've been really effective. When I got here, it was 43%. And yet it's a much bigger pie now, to be fair about it. And the auxiliaries and the research piece and all of those things have grown dramatically. But probably on that chart, the best support is in the state of Delaware. The worst support right now is in a place like Michigan. Michigan State's on this list. Michigan's on the aspirational institutions. But tuition at Michigan and tuition at Emory are not much different. You know, they're $37,000, $38,000 a year. And I have no quarrel with the privates. And you know, some of you know, one of my own ill-advised sons wandered off to Emory. We cleaned him up by having him marry a UGA girl. But I want good publics and good privates. I said in my California days, there's no competition among lighthouses, but we're in a situation now that the disparity in salaries and in general accommodations of these kind of issues between the publics and privates, the gap's too great. And we've got to have some public support in significant degrees going forward, or else we will fundamentally erode the public contract that we've had with the people of this state for 225 years. And I'm gonna go you one step further. And again, I've got great friends at Vanderbilt and Duke and Tulane and you name it. But most of your good privates today are collections of professional schools. You go look at the core. And you know, in Georgia, if we don't teach anthropology, sociology, classics, religion, philosophy, music, nobody's going to do it. Nobody's going to do it. And do we really want to be a place? I mean, my philosophy has been and remains, and I've done it financially to our own detriment. The University of Georgia needs to be the whole symphony. We need to have piccolos as well as tubas. We need to teach classics as well as molecular biology. And you know, anthropology is not the most popular major in America. But a real first-rate flagship university needs to be teaching those subjects. With all due respect, even at the name privates, you don't get that any longer. They've cut all that out. They've gone to business schools, med schools, law schools. In Emory's case, a very fine school of theology. But the core, the John Crow Ransom days at Vanderbilt, go look at English today at those places. And so these big flagships are the last American bastion of a true core, broad-based liberal arts education that I think many of us still believe in. And I must say, we've done a great job at Terry. I mean, you guys who are Terry grads, the first 2 years, and I'm still one of those people, I don't want you jumping right into business school the first semester. We can argue that, I know. Some faculty don't agree with me. But we believe in the core. This faculty still believes in the core. It's a really good question. Maybe more of an answer than you wanted. Yes, over here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you just talk a little bit about your plans for the medical college or the Old Navy supply facility?
Yeah, thanks very much, Richard. We will admit our first medical students in August in partnership with MCG. We've built a very nice facility, what used to be O'Malley's when some of you were there and needed medical help. It now can provide you medical help. We will begin in August and should operate there the first 2 or 3 years. The Navy will transfer the Navy Supply Corps School to us in late 2011. We'll do some renovations and we will build a full health sciences campus in Athens with our School of Public Health, with a good bit of biomed, biotech research, and with the medical partnership with MCG. We will be producing doctors in Athens starting in August. Others? Good question. Yes, sir.
Do you feel that the legislature put a larger percentage of the burden of cuts on education as opposed to all the other services provided by the state, or is that just the impression that the media has given us?
No, you're dead on. And here's what's happened. Here's what's happened. Nobody did that purposely. Let me say that to start with. But 20 years ago, the state of Georgia did two things, and most states did two things. They did education and they did roads. That's what you did in state government. You go back and you look at even governor's speeches in this state well into the 60s and 70s. But what has happened has been explosions in two or three different areas. Prisons, health care. State of Georgia wasn't in health care until the Medicare. And if you look at the percentages lost in K through 12 and higher ed in this state over the last 10 or 15 years, those percentages of the budget have largely gone to prisons and to health care. We have, I mean, regardless of how you feel about what the president has done on health care, you know, Tim Burgess knows as much about this as anybody in the room. He ran that department at the state for years. But that huge growth in medical cost has pushed out dollars that hitherto have been committed to education. And it's a generational kind of issue. You know, how much are we going to spend on grandma relative to the granddaughter? And we're going to have some tough judgment calls in this country to make on that issue. But if you know, and there are other little areas that have changed. We're spending a little more on economic development and those sorts of things, which I support. But if you look at a Georgia state budget now and 20 years ago, those are the kind of differences that you'll see. And what's the other area that's suffering right now in Georgia? Roads, transportation in general. So there have been some subtle and maybe even not so subtle changes in the 15-20% range of how that has evolved over the last several years. Maybe time for one more. I'm going to be cognizant of getting you out of here and going to work so you can pay taxes. Yes.
Thank you very much for everything this morning. I have a quick question. You only touched on it at the end, and it's relative to the endowment and gifts to the university, and how much of the actual tuition is covered by that, if any at all.
We don't use endowment except in a few very limited operational areas to cover faculty and those sorts of things, except as enhancements. And it's less than 1% of the total budget. We, all in, all out, we've got about $700 million in the markets, another couple $100 million in income-producing property. Most of our endowment goes to two areas. It goes to student support, scholarships, fellowships, et cetera, where we still now, given these increases, are going to have to do better. Need-based aid demands are up 45% the last 2 years. You'd be surprised at how many kids we have at Georgia of this academic quality who qualify for Pell Grants. It's in the neighborhood of 3,000 now. That's families with incomes of $40,000 or below. And then faculty endowments. If you are a faculty member in a chair, endowed professorship, et cetera, those are enhancements to keep your best students and your best faculty. That's basically how most publics use their endowments. They're not operational endowments like they are at many of the privates, like the one I came from. And so I think all in all, that's a sound philosophy. And I must say, while we have found this year to be a little tougher than the last four, our people have continued to step up to the plate even during this time, and it makes me very grateful for what many of you in this room have continued to do. Private giving long term will be the difference between this being a really good university and a truly great university. Because we will not be a truly great, we won't be a top 10 university on state support. You just can't do it. You've seen it. But as we build those enhancements for faculty and students, and I've said it 1,000 times, it's really a pretty simple business. You put the best possible student with the best possible faculty member in the best possible learning environment, and then you get out of the way as an administrator. And that's really what we've tried to do here the last 13 years. But those student endowments and faculty endowments will be the difference in us being what you want us to be and what we were 60 or 70 years ago. And I don't think any of us, even given the enrollment challenges and legislative challenges and all that we face, I don't think many of us want to go back. So I thank you for your support, and you honor me by giving me this time this morning. Thanks very much. Thank you, Robert.
Well, thank you, President Adams, for sharing your thoughts with us and answering questions. On behalf of our alumni board, I'd like to present you with this glass sculpture by a local artist, Loretta Eby. Thank you very much.
Last time they gave me a pencil.
For everyone who's attended, remember that your ticket out of the parking lot is just to say you were at Terry Third Thursday. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I hope to see you back next month. We're adjourned.